good morning. Thank you for joining me in the Breakfast Show. Remember, this is the Breakfast Show coming to you live from Pure Africa TV. My name is Evans Odhiambo. In the first bit of this particular show, as usual, we'll be interacting. Of course, you let me know where you are tuned in from, where you are watching from, of course, where you are able to follow this particular show from. Of course, during that particular bit, all our social media platforms are already open there for you. Remember, our fan page in Facebook is Pure Africa TV, Instagram Pure Africa TV, YouTube is Pure Africa TV, as well Twitter. You can as well tweet. Remember the hashtag this morning is the Breakfast Show. They'll be getting your comments, I'll be getting your tweets, of course, as we continue with the show. Remember, you can as well drop your comments via our WhatsApp number, especially during this particular bit of the show. Of course, during the first bit of the show, our WhatsApp number is 0796840560. They'll be getting your comment in the real time. Of course, I'll be shouting it out in the real time, especially during the first bit of this particular show as we continue, as we move on with the show. But getting to the second bit of this show, as usual, we'll be looking at some of the top news stories, those that are given a lot of weight, especially during the Breakfast Show today. Those particular stories that are regarded and considered the top news stories. But immediately after that, we'll be getting to the newspaper section, whereby we'll be looking at various newspapers as per their sections and subsections of those particular newspapers. Remember, we'll be looking at the world of politics. Then later we'll get to the county section. Then we will also look at what is coming up in the world of business. And so you are a lover of business, there you are at the right place, at the right time, the right place at the right time. Remember, you are a lover of politics as well. We'll get to interact as we move on, especially when we get to the second bit of this particular show. Remember, we'll also get to dwell into the county section just to see some of the stories that are transpiring from our county level, those that are local, of course. Remember, Pure Africa TV is the destination of your choice for both local and international content, not just international content, as well as local and international entertainment. And so, do not miss the second bit of this particular show. Of course, it is very scheduled, of course, looking at some of the stories that we'll get to talk about. When we get to that particular bit, of course, we see the issue of running mate is on the rise. Of course, it's a big headache now to the presidential flag bearers, both for different coalitions, both for different political parties as well. Remember, not just in Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, the same headache do exist now in Kenya Kwanza. Of course, we saw now task force, or we saw those that particular group that was tasked with deciding the fate of running mate in Kenya Kwanza, now proposing Kithure Kindiki, and other candidates had also been proposed there earlier. But remember, now it is the DP Ruto to decide the fate of the running mate position in that particular coalition. The same case to Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, of course. Going by whatever has been transpiring of late. Remember, the Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka saying that, or vehemently opposing the move that he should be interviewed by that particular committee. Of course, remember the 7-member committee tasked with that responsibility of deciding the fate of the running mate. And the selection began yesterday. Of course, later on the day, we had the committee saying that they will not actually give the interviews, or they will not actually do the interviews, but interested candidates are urged to apply within 24 hours. Actually, that particular deadline will be expiring by the end of today. Of course, that was declared by the chairperson or chairman for that particular committee, and that is none other than Noah Wekesa. So the issue of running mate is that which is worth noting. And remember, today, getting to the third bit of this particular show, we'll be talking about the issue of the running mate into details. Of course, you as a Kenyan citizen, you as a voter, of course, you've also seen how things transpire on a daily basis, how events unfold from one time to another, especially considering the subject of the running mate. If you were to be given opportunity, or if you were to get that particular opportunity to advise the presidential flag bearer, especially during this time that they are faced with a very big headache concerning the subject of the running mate, what would you tell them? Imagine if you were to given that particular opportunity, or if you were to get chance to advise ODM leader Raila Amolo Odinga, or rather to advise the Kenya Kwanza presidential flag bearer, the same time Deputy President William Ruto, especially on the subject of the running mate, what would you tell them, or what would be your advice to them, especially as far as running mate is considered? But there's a question that you begin to think about. Of course, you can as well start dropping your comments. Getting to the third bit of this particular show, I'll be gathering all your comments as far as that particular question is considered or is concerned, and there I'll be reading some of the comments, of course, going by our various platforms for comment section. Not just that, remember, today is the second day. You see the Form 1 students getting to schools amidst the challenges, financial challenges, tough economic time. Of course, the admission began yesterday, whereby we saw parents parents taking their sons and daughters to schools, but of course, there has been the challenge of finance, the financial challenge, and during that time, there are a lot of requirements that are needed. Of course, this proved to be a big headache yet again to the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Professor George Magoha, now saying that students should not fail to be admitted because they lack fee, whether they have fee or not. Provided they have the basic necessities, or they have the basic requirements, then they should be admitted to the secondary schools, and they should begin to learn. Of course, today is now the second day for that particular exercise. Of course, it's expected to be going on throughout the week to continue. Of course, it began yesterday. Today is the second day. Of course, amidst or despite the financial challenges, tough economic times, especially as said or as perceived by the parents. Remember, these are some of the stories that we'll be looking at deeply soon when we get to the second bit of the show. Meanwhile, this is a breakfast show live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio as well. Remember to follow us in our social media platforms. Facebook, our fan page is Pure Africa TV. Twitter, Pure Africa TV. Hashtag, remember, is the breakfast show. You can as well get to download our official app, that is none other than Pure Africa TV official app. What you need to do is simple, just get to your Google Play Store, of course, or your App Store there, and then type PATV, and there you will be having your Pure Africa TV official app. And having that particular application, remember, you'll be able to get all the latest trends and information both from Pure Africa TV and at the same time from Pure Africa Radio. Not just that, having that particular application, remember, you will be able to follow the live shows and programs both from Pure Africa TV and Pure Africa Radio. So join me. This is the breakfast show live from Pure Africa TV. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Join me now, and thank you very much for joining me even as the breakfast show begins. Breakfast Show. This is the Breakfast Show live from Pure Africa TV. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Remember, we are in the very first beat of this particular show, and as usual, the first beat of this show is such an interactive beat. Of course, during the first beat, I would visit our various comment sections, of course, as far as various platforms are concerned. Of course, I'll be visiting our Pure Africa TV official app to see the comment section. I'll be visiting our social media platforms, of course. I would even be visiting our WhatsApp number to see those that are already tuned into the show. And as we continue looking at the social media platforms, of course, Facebook to be particular, I see Madam Melody already tuned in all the way from Thika Campus, Mount Kenya. Thank you very much. Saying good morning, following the show. Thank you very much. Good morning to you. For choosing Pure Africa TV. Thank you for choosing the breakfast show. Of course, Owino Victor already tuned in all the way from Homa Bay County. Thank you very much. Remember, this your destination of choice. This is a destination of choice for both local and international content at the same time as international and local entertainment. Remember, getting to the second bit of the show, of course, some of the stories that we'll be looking at today, we see IEBC now to begin confirmation of details of registered voters. And so you there are registered voter, of course, you may be doubting some of your registration credentials as far as your voting. As far as your voting details are concerned, remember, you can as well visit any nearest IEBC office there, and of course to correct or to look at your details if they are up to date. Meanwhile, registration of new voters has been stopped for a while until next year, or until 2023, the month of March. That is when that particular process will resume again. Of course, this has been done in an effort to update and confirm and update the existing details, or update some of the details of the existing voters. Remember, this is being done according to the Kenyan Constitution. And of course, that was a declaration made by the IEBC chairman, Wafula Chebukati. Those are some of the stories that we'll be looking at deeply when we get to the second bit of the show. Of course, we see now Kenya Kwanza Brigade also rallied their campaigns in Kisii County. Of course, yesterday throwing jabs at what President Uhuru Kenyatta said, or some trying to revisit again the sentiments of President Uhuru Kenyatta, especially during the Labor Day celebration. Of course, we saw DP Ruto react to that. We saw ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi react to that. At the same time, we saw the Ford Kenya party leader Moses Wetangula as well reacting to that. Of course, this was yesterday in Kisii County. That's a story that we'll be looking at, of course, when we get to that particular bit of the show. Meanwhile, Azimio la Umoja Brigade also have been continuing with their campaigns, of course, in the central part of Kenya. Remember, since the burial of the late President Mwai Kibaki, they have been camping in Mount Kenya. They have been camping in Mount Kenya, of course, ahead of the general elections, of course, rallying their campaigns for the presidential candidature. Of course, that is none other than Raila Amolo Odinga, who is the Azimio la Umoja presidential flag bearer. At the same time, the ODM, or Orange Democratic Party leader. Remember, today, getting to the third bit of the show, of course, today we'll be talking about the issue of running mate. Remember, the issue of running mate is on the rise again, and of course is that which is seen to be causing a lot of headache as the flag bearers for presidential positions, or presidential flag bearers are now in between a very tough decision on deciding who is the suitable running mate for that political position. Who is the suitable running mate for that political position? And so during the third bit of the show, I'll be asking you a question assume you are to have that particular opportunity to advise the presidential candidates, especially as far as the subject of running mate is concerned, what would you say? What would you, which particular advice would you give them? Which particular piece of advice will you give as far as this? Assume you are to get that particular opportunity to advise Deputy President William Ruto on the subject of running mate, or you are to get that particular opportunity to advise the ODM leader Raila Amolo Odinga, what would you say? Well, that's what we'll be talking about when we get to the third bit of the show, of course, gathering your comments as far as that is concerned. Remember, the subject of the running mate is that which has been seen to be controversial yet again. Of course, we see different political parties proposing different individuals, different leaders that are aligned to their political parties as best suited for that, of course. Remember, it is only one candidate that will finally, by the end of the day, it's one candidate who will be regarded as the most suitable candidate for that. Of course, we will be going for that. But currently, we see a lot of proposals, and at the same time, a lot of reactions as far as that particular subject is concerned. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for choosing the Breakfast Show, of course, live from Pure Africa TV. Pure Africa Radio. Now join me even as we get to the second bit of this particular show. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Now welcome officially to the second bit of the show. Of course, during the second bit of the show, we will begin looking at some of the top news stories, those that are given weight, especially during the breakfast show. Then later we'll be proceeding to the newspapers, of course, to look at various newspapers and going by the various sections and various subsections of those particular newspapers. And of course, before the newspapers, we'll look at the top news stories, and of course, looking at some of the top stories that we have today in the breakfast show. Of course, we see Kenya Kwanza core principles regarding interviewing of Kalonzo for the running mate as a lack of respect. Remember, that bit of interview or interviewing interested candidates to get to the running point position, of course, for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya presidential flag bearers, that which has been accompanied with a lot of reactions getting from different political parties, coming from different leaders, at the same time, interestingly enough, even coming from the opponents. Of course, those are the Kenya Kwanza. Now we see we saw Kenya Kwanza's members, of course, the co-principals, saying that would be lack of respect to invite the Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka in such interviews, especially to ascertain if he is at least the most suitable candidate for that. Of course, saying they were saying that going by how the Wiper Party leader is known, of course, going by his popularity, ought not to be interviewed for the same. He would be offered that. And of course, not just that, looking at even some of the reactions from other allies or other political allies, those that are allied to Kalonzo Musyoka, who is the Wiper Party leader, of course, also saying that they would not agree that Kalonzo be interviewed or Kalonzo face that particular panel of our committee of 7 to determine whether he is the most suitable candidate or he is not. Of course, we saw Honorable Dan Manzu respond to that or react to that, because that is the Secretary General for the Wiper Party. At the same time, we see reactions from DP Ruto, we see reactions from Moses Wetangula. Of course, these are the opponents. I remember the other day we saw a section of politicians that are allied to Kenya Kwanza now inviting Kalonzo to get to Kenya Kwanza so that they can work together, despite facing disrespect in Azimio la Umoja One Kenya. Remember, this issue can be traced back from the burial ceremony from that particular day when the late President Mwai Kibaki was being laid to rest. There were allegations that the Wiper Party boss was not recognized by his Azimio la Umoja core principles, only to be recognized later by Deputy President William Ruto, who happens to be the flag bearer, to be the presidential flag bearer for Kenya Kwanza. And so this particular motion can be traced back from there. Of course, we say now a committee of 7 to decide the fate of the running mate candidates, or to fate of the running mate, especially for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya alliance. Of course, earlier on there were allegations of intervening, but later confirmed by the chairperson. For that particular committee, which is to decide the fate of the running mate for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition. That is now our case, saying that the interviewing will not be there. Meanwhile, candidates have to submit the applications. Of course, interested candidates to submit the applications before the close of business today. Of course, it was to be within 24 hours. Of course, that will today. Of course, those particular candidates who submit the applications, of course, there are qualifications yet again for such candidates. Of course, one must be a member of a party that is allied to Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, and of course the chance is even extended to those that feel that they want to submit their applications as independent for that particular position, of course, of the running mate, of course, of the running. Earlier on, we also saw Kalonzo also getting vehemently opposed to being interviewed or facing that particular panel for the interview to determine if he is the best suitable candidate for that particular position, of course, for the running mate position. Remember, this particular issue is to be settled by the 9th day of the month of May 2022. By the 9th of May, of course, this particular committee of this particular task force is expected to shall have decided on who is the most suitable running mate for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya alliance presidential flag bearer Raila Amolo Odinga. Then later on, by 10th of May 2022, we expect that ODM leader as well as the Azimio flag bearer, that is Raila Amolo Odinga, is expected to publicly announce that particular running mate that this committee shall have settled on. And remember, by the close of business on 16th, that particular candidate or the flag bearers, presidential flag bearers to various political coalitions, to various political parties, are expected to submit the names of their running mates to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and not just presidential flag bearers, but even the gubernatorial flag bearers to various counties are as well expected to submit the names of their running mates to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Of course, it's something that will transpire with time. Of course, a lot is likely is being expected from that, and of course, a lot is likely to unfold. As for us, we will be briefing you, of course, giving you full details of these particular issues, even as they unfold, even as they transpire. Of course, switching gears from that particular story, of course, we see now IEBC to begin confirmation of details of registered voters. Remember, this particular exercise began on Wednesday. Of course, that was yesterday, the 4th of May 2022. IEBC, Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, have now begun to register. Have now begun to confirm the registration details, of course, for the registered voters. And during that time, now we see the registration of new voters now brought to a standstill until that particular time, or until 13th of March. The year will be 2023. Of course, that is 13th of March 2023, or next year. That's when the registration of new voters will resume again. Meanwhile, a confirmation of the voter details for the registered voters is going on. So you are doubting, or are you having doubt as far as your voting credentials are concerned? Are you doubting your voting details? Remember, you can visit any nearby IEBC office, and there you'll have your details checked, of course, ahead of the 9th August 2022 general election. Remember, you visiting that particular office, you are expected to have your national identity card. You are expected to have your national identity card when as you visit the nearby Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission office, just to confirm your voting details, to confirm your voting credentials, especially if you feel that you are doubting your details. Remember, all these are just preparations that are geared towards the general elections, of course, some 3 months just ahead to the 9th of August 2022 general elections. So you can get to a nearest IEBC office to confirm your voting credentials, to confirm your voting details, to confirm if your details are up to date on the system, of course, for the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Of course, to a standstill, the registration of new members is said to be according to the Constitution, of course, to give room first for confirmation of already registered voters ahead of the 9th August 2022 general election. Of course, according to the Constitution, to give room for confirmation of already registered voters. Of course, these were sentiments made by the IEBC chairperson, or IEBC chairman, Wafula Chebukati. IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati. Of course, Kenyans doubting their registration as voters also are urged to visit nearby IEBC offices for confirmation of their voting credentials. Of course, do not forget your national identity card. You visiting that particular office, of course, for the IEBC. Get to equip yourself with your national identity card so that you can be attended to effectively, of course, by the officers in charge of that. Remember, this particular exercise began yesterday and it is still continuing. Meanwhile, moving to the next story, of course, we see Kenya Kwanza brigades rally their campaigns in Kisii County, of course, yesterday, led by the three major core principles for that particular coalition. Of course, for the Kenya Kwanza coalition, there we saw Deputy President William Ruto, who is as well the flag bearer for the presidential flag bearer for Kenya Kwanza. Of course, we also saw ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi. At the same time, we saw the Ford Kenya leader Moses Wetangula leading that again. Of course, we saw Mudavadi criticizing President Uhuru Kenyatta's claims on Labor Day. Remember the sentiments of President Kenyatta on Labor Day, that some of the leaders, especially this that was perceived to be directed to Deputy President William Ruto, though he never mentioned names. We saw President Kenyatta saying that some of the leaders take advantage of the crisis that affects the country and begin to politicize the government at the expense of coming or at the expense of bringing their heads together or joining him together so that they can look at the necessary solutions to that particular to that particular problem affecting the country. Of course, these were being perceived to be directed to the Deputy President William Ruto. There later, we saw Deputy President himself react to that particular sentiment, saying that those particular leaders that the President had trusted with some of the positions, especially during his second term, have failed him, and have failed his government, especially during the second term. Remember the unity or the unity between President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy Dr. William Ruto began to be distanced during the second term, when ODM party leader Raila Amolo Odinga began to work closely with President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Of course, that's when DP Ruto began to distance himself from those, from some of the services. Of course, we also saw President Kenyatta giving some of the responsibilities yet to other members. Of course, some of them were the cabinet secretaries. And of course, a lot of changes happened during the second term. Of course, these are those that are perceived by members of Kenya Kwanza that had made a failure in the Jubilee regime, especially during the second bit, during the second term of President Uhuru Kenyatta's government. Of course, the leaders have reacted to that, and this was the same case, of course, yesterday in Kisii County, when the Kenya Kwanza were rallying up their campaigns in Kisii ahead of the presidential campaigns, of course, for the Deputy President William Ruto. Of course, we see Mudavadi, we see ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi saying that it's now too late to complain. It's now too late for President Uhuru Kenyatta to complain, as he nearly has only 100 days to leave the office. Of course, saying that he has been in the office for the last 10 years, but now begins to complain now, even as days are drawing closer and closer for him to quit the office, even as the general elections are nearing. Then has been in the we see also DP Ruto reiterates that though President Kenyatta signed its roles, or assigned some of the deputy president's roles to some of his trusted individuals within his government, especially during the second term of his regime, that particular move that has seen these particular individuals, of course the trusted individuals, fail him. Of course, this was some of the sentiments from Deputy President in reacting to that. Meanwhile, we see DP promising that it's good, general elections are nearing, and so he promised to reset the button for the country even after the general election. Of course, that was in Kisii County yesterday. Meanwhile, we see the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition brigades camping in Mount Kenya region, of course, ahead of the 2022 general elections, of course, ahead of the 9th August 2022 general elections, of course, led by the ODM leader Raila Amolo Odinga. At the same time, the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya flag bearer Raila Amolo Odinga, of course, promises to lead the country and take it ahead from where the late President Mwai Kibaki left it, and from where President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta shall leave it. Of course, those are some of the sentiments in the campaigns, especially in the mountain region, or in the Mount Kenya region. Remember ODM party leader Raila Amolo Odinga has been camping in the Mount Kenya region since that particular day that the late President Mwai Kibaki's body was laid to rest. He has been since then he has been camping in that particular region for the political campaigns, of course, ahead of his presidential ambitions for the 9th August 2022 general election. And Aside from that particular story, of course, we see the issue of running mate again in Kenya Kwanza coalition. Of course, we see the Kenya Kwanza running mate Kithure Kindiki proposed. Remember, there was another section of individuals or another a group that was being tasked with proposals or making proposals and deciding some of the suitable members for that political position, of course, for the running mate position for the Kenya Kwanza. Then later the entire fate was to be decided by the Deputy President William Ruto, who is the same time the Kenya Kwanza presidential flag bearer. Of course, we see Kithure Kindiki proposed, of course, as the most suitable candidate. Of course, among other candidates that are proposed are the Mathira MP, Mathira Member of Parliament, of course, Rigathi Gachagua. Then we see Anne Waiguru. Of course, all these are from the central part of Kenya, from the Mount Kenya region. Kithure Kindiki. We have the Mathira Member of Parliament, Rigathi Gachagua. At the same time, we have Governor Anne Mumbi Waiguru, of course. That is the Kirinyaga County Governor. At the same time, we see Justice Justin Muturi, the National Assembly Speaker. Remember, Justin Muturi recently joined the Kenya Kwanza team. Of course, his name has also been proposed as well as a suitable running mate for the Kenya Kwanza presidential flag bearer. Of course, that is none other than Deputy President William Ruto. Of course, remember the issue of region is that which is causing a lot of reactions again. Regional balance, then again the issue of gender balance and other issues, popularity being given weight again, consideration to that. Of course, earlier on we saw a section of members or a section of politicians, those that are aligned to ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi, proposed that he is the best suited candidate or to the best suited candidate to fit to that particular position, of course, for the running mate for Deputy President William Ruto. Of course, remember the sentiments of the Kakamega Senator Cleophas Malala in relation to that. Meanwhile, it is the DP to decide finally the fate of his running mate. Remember, even after all this, even after all those proposals that have been made, after all those determinations, of course, by that particular group that was trusted with that responsibility of deciding who the suitable running mate is, it is now DP to come finally and make the final decision as far as that is concerned. Remember, that particular issue is to be settled and the presentation made to the IEBC on or before 16th of May 2022. So looking at the Azimio la Umoja, the issue of running mate is on the rise. Looking at Kenya Kwanza, the same story, and that's why I'll be asking you during the third bit of the show that assume that you are to get that particular chance, of course, a rare chance for that to to give your pieces of advice, maybe to this particular flag bearers, maybe for the Kenya Kwanza, that is DP William Ruto, for Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition, that is Raila Amolo Odinga, of course, even for the Sapena Party. What would be your advice to them? What would be your advice to them as far as that is concerned? Remember, you can drop your comments via our comment sections. Of course, our various comment sections. Remember, our fan page Facebook is Pure Africa TV. You can drop your comment there. I'll be getting it in real time. Of course, Instagram Pure Africa TV, YouTube is Pure Africa TV, Twitter at Pure Africa TV. Remember, you tweeting the hashtag this morning is the breakfast show. I'll be getting your comments, of course, during the third bit of the show, and then during the third and the last bit of this particular show, I'll be going through some of your tweets, I'll be going through some of your comments, I'll be going through our various comment section just to see your reactions on that, especially on that particular subject that we will be talking about, especially during the third bit of the show. Assume that you were to get that very rare opportunity to give your advice to the Azimio la Umoja presidential flag bearer or to Kenya Kwanza flag bearer. What will you tell them, especially in consideration to the running mate? Remember, that's just to gather your opinions or generally as far as that is confirmed. Moving forward, we see the Azimio la Umoja, Azimio Running Mate Committee now decides that they will not interview the interested candidates. Now they will not be interviewing the interested candidates as earlier been mentioned. Remember, the issue of interviewing of the candidates that which earlier saw a lot of reactions, of course, emanating from a section of politicians, those that are allied to the Wiper Party leader, Kalonzo Musyoka, those that are allied to Wiper Party, saying that based on Kalonzo's popularity, of course, he should not even face that particular committee or that particular panel for interview, for that particular interview. Of course, these are some of the sentiments that were emanating from those particular leaders that are aligned to Kalonzo Musyoka, who is the Wiper Party leader, of course, saying that he should not face that particular challenge. He should be directly given that position to become the running mate for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance presidential flag bearer. Of course, that is none other than Raila Amolo Odinga. Of course, Kalonzo himself was also vehemently opposed to that particular decision, of course, for the running mate, or that particular motion for the running mate. But now we see that particular committee saying that running mates will, or these interested candidates for the running mate position will not be interviewed. Rather, they are expected to submit their applications before or by the end of today. Of course, today will be the deadline. Remember, they were given 24 hours to do that particular submission. And so, by the close of business today, that particular exercise of that particular deadline shall have expired. Of course, we see interested candidates who send their applications within 24 hours by the end of business today. And at the same time, some of the qualifications, of course, mentioned there. For example, be a member of a political party that is allied to Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition. That is one. And at the same time, remember independent candidates that that are also interested in that political position or interested in being candidates or being running mates for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya presidential flag bearer are also given that opportunity. Of course, they can as well tender their applications. They can as well send their applications. Of course, this was declared by Noah Wekesa, who is the chairperson for that particular committee, tasked with that responsibility of deciding the most suitable running mate for Raila Amolo Odinga, who is the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition presidential flag bearer. Of course, there's also guideline. There's also guideline given to that. Of course, those interested candidates should apply and send the applications to this particular site. Of course, runningmateazimio.ke. Runningmateazimio.ke. Of course, that is the particular site for submitting your applications as an interested candidate to that. There later, that particular committee will settle on this particular issue. Of course, will decide who is the most suitable running mate. Remember, proposals have earlier been given, of course, as far as gender is concerned. The other day we saw a section of women, of course, from Nairobi, saying that Martha Karua is the most suitable. Remember, going by what has transpired as far as this is concerned. We also saw Charity Ngilu showing interest for that political position, of course, showing interest as a candidate to fit to that running mate position, of course, for the ODM leader, who is the Azimio la Umoja Oka presidential flag bearer. And so it is the committee to decide the final fate of this later. By, of course, on 9th of May, they'll announce, or they'll present it to ODM leader Raila Amolo Odinga, who in effect will announce it to the public on 10th, and later on the name shall be presented to the IEBC, of course, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And switching gears to the next story, now we see Form 1s to continue joining the country despite the tough economic time, of course, said by the parents. Of course, we saw parents beginning to admit their ladies or their boys and girls to their respective secondary schools. Of course, those that they received calling letters to join. Of course, the challenge, or rather the challenge that is being centered on by the parents is a tough economic time, especially as far as finance is concerned. At the same time, several requirements needed. Interestingly, or to that which would be good news, we see now Cabinet Secretary for Education, George Magoha, Professor George Magoha, now saying that those particular students who do not have fee, even as they join or even as they get admitted, should not be sent home or should not fail to be admitted just because they lack fee. They should be admitted. And of course, he has given a directive that each and every student who of course should get a slot or should get to be admitted to his or her respective secondary school, of course, with that which he received or that which the same. Of course, those are some of the sentiments from Professor George Magoha, sounding a warning against sending home students, or sounding warning against failing to register or failing to admit students who lack fee during that particular admission time. During that particular admission time, of course, it's this week. It's going on. It's the exercise, or that entire exercise began yesterday, and it's still going on, because today is the day 2 or the second day for that. Of course, not all schools require students to come with all those lot of requirements. Of course, schools seem to be different as far as these particular requirements are concerned. Of course, for example, in Kenya High, we see now students, especially those who lack these particular requirements, now being advised to use the existing equipments and requirements. Of course, those that are within the institution, those that are within the facilities. Of course, those particular requirements that had been used by their predecessors, that in Kenya High. And so the schools are different, and as far as this is concerned, of course, schools give different approaches to this. That would be determined by the capacity of the school, or financial stability of that particular school, because you cannot compare maybe a day school and maybe a national school as far as those particular requirements are concerned. Then we see Form 1s continue joining. Of course, this week they are to continue joining. Those are some of the stories, of course, that were regarded as the top most stories, especially during today's breakfast show. Of course, during the first bit of this during the second bit of this particular show, that particular session for the top news stories. But remember, soon we are now getting to the newspapers to see those particular stories that are transferring from the county level. At the same time, we look at those particular stories generally covered under various sections and various subsections of the newspaper, so that we get there. But remember, getting to the third bit of this particular show, I'll be asking you a question. Of course, we'll be talking about the subject of running mate, that which is seen to be, causing a lot of headache, especially for the presidential flag bearers to various political parties, to various political coalitions, even to those that are going as independent candidates. Remember, we have 46. We have 46 candidates who have already made their submissions to go to the ballot, of course, for the presidential position, the topmost seat. But later, their fate will yet again be decided by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, of course, who will look at their qualifications under various grounds, under various constitutional grounds, of course, as determined by the Constitution in partnership with IEBC, or in conjunction to the IEBC. Of course, some of the issues that will be looked at is whether these particular individuals have the officers of operation. At the same time, they look at whether these particular individuals have that particular ticket, or have a confirmation from the registrar of political parties that has actually confirmed that they have qualified to be to go for that particular position, of course, the presidential position, as independent candidates. Stay with me. Remember, I'm taking a very short break. Coming later, I'll be getting to the newspapers. Of course, we'll be reviewing the newspapers. Remember, we have the Star, of course. We'll get to review it as far as various sections and as far as various subsections of this particular newspaper is concerned. Later on, we'll get to the third bit of the show. Of course, you'll get to share with me your comments, your opinions, your ideas as far as the subject of discussion today will be concerned. I'm taking a very short break. Coming later, we'll get officially to the newspapers to begin the newspaper review. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Continue staying with me as she's taking a very short break. Later, I'll be back with much more.
For joining me in the breakfast show. Of course, remember this thing, the second bit of this particular show. Of course, we are now getting to the newspaper section. Of course, to the newspaper review, and we have the Star newspaper. Looking at the front page, we see Raila's assertive new game plan in Mount Kenya. Remember, the ODM leader as well as Azimio la Umoja presidential flag bearer has been campaigning in that particular region for quite some time, since the burial of the late President Mwai Kibaki, of course, ahead of his 2022, of course, 9th August 2022 general elections. Of course, looking at the presidential position, of course, yesterday we saw him being accompanied by other dignitaries, of course, Cabinet Secretary for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, being among those who accompanied him yesterday in Mount Kenya region. Remember, Mount Kenya region is that particular region that has been termed to be vote rich. At the same time, it's that particular region that is seen to be attracting a lot of competitions, of course, from various political parties, various political coalitions, at the same time from various individuals, of course, who are eyeing especially some political positions, of course, at the top level, presidency being included. And that's why when it comes to the issue of running mate, Mount Kenya region is to be considered yet again, because it is one of the regions that is currently being considered highly rich in votes. Of course, moving forward to the next story, we see Kalonzo Gideon Moi now to take Azimio campaigns to Mombasa. Remember this schedule, of course, these are some of the sentiments, of course, by the Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka yesterday, of course, as they plan to take Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya coalition campaigns to Mombasa County. Of course, we see Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka has released an itinerary for a 3-day Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya Alliance campaign tour to the coastal region. Of course, that's Mombasa County. Of course, says that this particular itinerary indicates that Kalonzo will be accompanied in the Ukambani Mombasa campaign tour by KANU party leader Gideon Moi on Thursday. Of course, the two coalition supporters before the 9th August polls. Of course, those are some of the preparations yet again that are being made ahead of the 9th August general election. Meanwhile, the subject of the running mate still there, despite those particular preparations made in order. Of course, there's a question as to whether Kalonzo will be the most suitable running mate, despite will be the most suitable running mate as per that particular committee. But let's wait and see. Of course, it's upon the committee to decide later. Of course, it's you, the public, will be, our viewers will be
knowing, of course, we'll let you know in time whatever shall transpire from that, Of course, moving on to the next story, we see ex-IEBC chief Hassan Zaja shortlisted for judge position. Of course, there's transpired yesterday, of course, that particular shortlisting for those positions. Of course, we see the former IEBC chairman Ahmed Isaac Hassan, and vice person Lilian Mahiri Zaja among 105 candidates that have been shortlisted by the Judicial Service Commission to be interviewed for the position of the judge. Of course, the Judicial Service Commission is seeking to recruit 6 judges for the Court of Appeal and another 20 to the High Court. Of course, Hassan is among the 31 candidates shortlisted for the Court of Appeal job, while Mahiri Zaja will face the interview for the interview panel for the court judge position. Remember, that's a shortlisting that, or the details of that particular shortlisting were released yesterday. Of course, the two are as well shortlisted among many other candidates who had showed interest for that particular position. Of course, moving forward, we see now weak Azimio candidates to step down in a new plan. Weak Azimio candidates to step down in a new plan. Of course, that's also a story that it's captured here. Who could be the weak Azimio candidates? Of course, that's a question that somebody could be asking in regard to this particular story. Because we see a fresh assessment awaits Azimio candidates competing for the same seat under different parties affiliated with the ODM leader Raila Amolo Odinga led coalition. Of course, that is the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition. The former Prime Minister announced this would be to allow only the candidates with high chances of winning to proceed to the ballot. Of course, on 9th of August. We also see the ODM leader saying the coalition party will allow the candidates in such areas to campaign for 1 month after a fresh review will be conducted. Remember, this is in line with the program that was rolled or that which was announced by the ODM leader as well as the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition flag bearer. That is none other than Raila Amolo Odinga. Of course, that particular schedule of planning committees as far as campaigns are concerned, especially as far as various regions, various counties and various sub-counties are concerned. Right from the MCA's position, of course, member of county assemblies, up to the topmost political position. Of course, that is the presidential position. Of course, we saw saying that this is to be channeled, or this is to be planned or to be scheduled from the smallest position or from the MCA's position to the topmost position. Of course, that is the presidential position. Those are some of the strategies, of course, that are laid down for effective campaigning ahead of the 9th August 2022 general election. Ahead of that particular general election, of course, that's a story that has been also captured in this particular section of the Star. Then moving on to the next story, now we see girls belly a balloon. Kilifi mom now seeks help. Of course, this is a very sad story, also given coverage under this particular bit, of course, concerning the Kilifi, concerning this Kilifi mom of a 4-year-old girl. Of course, in Kilifi, we see a 4-year-old girl in Kilifi. Is very sick. Abdomen has swollen like a balloon for the far larger than the head, of course. Now doctors don't know for sure, but believes she has a heart condition. Of course, her mother Bendera Nduya now says her daughter Zawadi Neema is suffering from massive this is now a water build up, such a serious health condition. Of course, now seeking help. See, and I said she delivered her daughter at home without any complications, and then the baby started coughing for a few days. Of course, that's a sad story. The mother now seeks help for that. Of course, to see the 4-year-old daughter get thorough treatment, and of course the condition be corrected as early as possible. And moving forward to the next story, of course, we see Russia denies its plans to declare war on May. Now see, Russia has now denied its plans to declare war on the 9th of May. That's a story that is also captured here, and maybe to look at it deeply into details. So now we see Russia has now finally dismissed speculations that it will declare all-out war in Ukraine in the coming days as nonsense. Of course, Moscow has up to until now denied it is at war, instead referring to the invasion as a special military operation. But Western officials have also speculated that President Vladimir Putin could use the 9th May victory parade to announce an escalation of the military action. Remember, that's from that's an international, of course. Remember the war between Ukraine and Russia, of course, that which was seen to be very devastating, of course, also impacted negatively on the economy, not just for those particular countries, but even extended to our economy, of course, as well extended to our economy, of course, also captured there. Then we see Galusha and the popular cause now seeks to farm fund. Galusha and the popular causes now seeks to farming fund. Of course, very interesting story as far as the career opportunities, as far as the career priority is also concerned. Of course, the 2018 economic survey indicates that degree enrollment of the agricultural courses in Kenya decreased from 24,221 students in 2017 to 18,165. Of course, that is for 2017. Of course, the report by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics attributed the decline to the lack of interest from students. But there is hope. Of course, young people are still taking interest in agriculture and demystifying the myth that it is boring. Remember, there's been that movement from agricultural courses to another. Those particular students that have been showing interest in agricultural courses of late, according to this particular research, had significantly decreased. Of course, the field day was organized by the International Corps. Of course, has significantly decreased. And that which is attracting reactions, that which is seen to be attracting reactions, of course, as many others, as wine, students are showing reduced interest as far as agricultural courses are concerned. Of course, you can as well respond to that. Why do you think there has been a decrease as far as agricultural courses are concerned, despite the fact that they well pay as well, despite the fact that they pay as well? Of course, that's a question that you as well as a guardian, as a parent, of course, as even a student can try to think about. Of course, that is all about that particular section. Let's now switch to the business section. Now let us switch to business section. Remember, you can as well continue dropping your comments via our various comment sections. Of course, our social media platforms. Remember, our fan page, Facebook is Pure Africa TV. YouTube is Pure Africa TV. You can as well tweet hashtag. This particular morning is the breakfast show, because I'll be getting your comments, I'll be getting your tweets on the real time. Remember, during the third bit of the show, I'll be gathering your comments, of course, to ask you, or in response to that particular subject today of discussion, of course, the running mate. The running mate. The subject of the running mate, of course, were you to get that particular opportunity to advise the presidential flag bearers on this particular issue, what would be your message to them? What will be your message to them generally? Remember, these are times that they are facing, or they are, facing tough times, especially they arising from the headache of deciding who is the most suitable candidate for the running mate. Of course, going by various reactions, going by various proposals from all over different political parties, all over different allies that are aligned to different political leaders. Of course, those have also shared interest, or those that have shown their interest as candidates for that particular position, of course, running mate position. I'm taking a very short break. Coming later, we are getting to the business section. Continue staying with me. for staying with me. Thank you very much for staying with me. This is the Pure Africa TV, of course, the breakfast show coming to you live from Pure Africa TV. Join me even as we get to the business section, of course. Now looking at some of the stories that are covered under the business section. Of course, we see Kenya now clearing farms now to face closure as shipping lines take off. Of course, that's a story that has been given the top coverage that has been given the top coverage under this particular section, of course, the business section. We see more than 1,000 Kenyans based clearing and forwarding farms could close in the wake of a takeover by international shipping lines. Of course, players in the sector now won. This puts slightly over 10,000 jobs on the line, where on average clearing farm employees, at least 10 people, according to the Kenya International Freight and Warehousing Association, because that has been given that particular coverage under this particular section. Of course, we see there has been an aggressive move by the global shipping, docking the Mombasa to incorporate clearing and forwarding services within their freight packages, threatening to push out small local players to that. Of course, also captured under that particular section, of course, the business section. Meanwhile, we see millers now feel crunch on weak shilling as cost of production rise. Of course, this from the millers. The continued weakening of the Kenya shilling is pushing up the cost of production of animal feeds within with the millers worried now that they might soon not afford key ingredients. Remember, this is a move that has been caused. By the increasing cost or increasing prices of flour, at the same time animal feeds, of course, that is now bringing a lot of worry to the millers. Of course, Association of Kenya Feed Manufacturers Secretary General Martin Kinoti now says countries within the region, including Uganda, Zambia, and Malawi, are now quoting prices of commodities by the dollar and rejecting the Kenya shilling. Of course, that's a very big blow. That's a very big blow, especially to those that are transacting with the Kenya shillings. Of course, this we saw yesterday. Of course, the US dollar traded at 115 shillings and 80 cents. Compared to 115 shillings and 74 cents, of course, on the previous weeks. Of course, we see the Central Bank of Kenya has also downplayed the currency depreciation, now saying the shilling remained stable against major international regional currencies. So captured under that particular section, of course, the business section, the currency on the rise again. Maybe to switch to the next story, of course, now we see Safaricom appoints new special projects boss. Safaricom has now appointed a new special projects boss. Of course, Safaricom has appointed Michael Mutiga. The boss, this new appointee is Michael Mutiga, of course, as the new Chief Business Development and Strategy Officer in the new changes issued by the firm's Chief Executive Officer, Peter Ndengu. Of course, Mutiga's appointment follows the retirement of Joe Ogutu on 1st May. Remember, this was also captured last on 1st May. We saw Joe Ogutu coming to retire now finally, and finally Mutiga has been appointed to get to that particular position after the retirement of Joe Ogutu. Of course, in the announced changes, we saw Dave was saying Motiga will lead Safaricom's business development and the transformation agenda, and it will be responsible for Safaricom's funding strategy and asset optimization. Of course, those are some of the roles. Of course, he will be trusted with for that particular telecommunication company. Of course, Safaricom is one of the largest telecommunication company in Kenya. Remember, those are some of the news, those are some of the stories that were given coverage under this particular section, because this is the business section. Remember, soon we are getting to the county section, but the question still remains. Remember the question I asked you that I'll be gathering your comments on when we get to the third bit of the breakfast show. Of course, I'll be gathering your comments on the issue of the running mate, on the issues of the running mate. Of course, I asked to assume you were to get that particular opportunity to advise the presidential flag bearers as far as the subject of running, or generally what would be your piece of advice to them. Remember, on this particular issue, I'll be gathering your comments from our various comment sections or from our various comment platforms as far as that particular subject of discussion today. Of course, in the third bit of the show is concerned. Remember, you can drop your comment via all our comments via our various comment sections as far as in the various platforms. Remember, you using the social media platforms, you can drop your comment via our Facebook or rather YouTube. Remember, Facebook, our fan page is Pure Africa TV, YouTube Pure Africa TV, but you can as well tweet at Pure Africa TV. The hashtag is Breakfast Show. You can as well drop your comment via our WhatsApp line. Of course, the number is 0796840560. I'll be getting your comments in the real time. Getting to the third bit of the show, I'll be reading your comment, and then as we will be coming to an end of that particular show. Now let's switch gears and get to the county section, of course, to see some of the stories, to look at some of the events that have transpired from our county level, from the village level, of course, from our sub-counties level as well. Of course, we see Shana divisive leaders. Ole Ntimama now tells Trans Nzoia leaders to shun divisive leaders. Of course, there's a time that the issue of unity, peace and unity is really focused on, especially ahead of the 2022 general election, ahead of the 9th of August general election. Of course, we see now Ole Ntimama speak about the same. Of course, beware politicians spewing divisive politics to disrupt the August election. Former Trans Nzoia Senator Henry Ole Ndiema has said. Of course, he also urged all the Trans Nzoia residents and Kenya at large to support the Kenya Kwanza coalition and its presidential candidate, Dr. William Ruto, and the bottom-up initiative to fix the economy. Of course, the issue of peace and unity, especially ahead of the 9th general elections, are being centered on, and even during the same we saw during the Ramadan celebrations, of course, by the Muslim faithful, centering on the issue of peace and unity between this particular time until election, and even during election, and even after election. So captured under the county section. Then you see mask wants, then under this other section. Remember, these are some of the stories that are transpiring within our various county sections. Of course, we see Madhava 3 begs help after a series of misfortune, because such a sad story also captured And let's now look at it into details. Of course, we see Blessing Misago, a 27-year-old mother of 3, has been undergoing a lot of challenges and has now turned to well-wishers for help. Of course, Misago, who does manual jobs for a living, said that she had to give her firstborn daughter to a well-wisher after the death of her husband in 2020. Of course, those are some of the challenges that that this particular mother is facing. Of course, a mother of 3. Now, extending, of course, now appealing to the well-wishers to help to support her, of course, to make the ends meet, especially now that she has children, of course, that are looking up to her, of course, as far as their survival is concerned, as far as their education is concerned, of course, as far as all the necessities for the children is concerned. And moving forward to the next story, of course, under this particular section, this is the county section, we see now fact-checked information, be objective, editors now tell. Also, particular section. Remember, this comes just a day after. This comes just after 2 days after the World Press Freedom Day, especially for the journalists. Now, journalists have been urged to always fact-check information and ensure objectivity. Of course, speaking in Meru, this was on Tuesday during the year's World Press Freedom Day celebration. Kenya Editors Guild representative, of course, for the digital group, of course, we see Francis Murray, guidance and training to sharpen journalists to journalist skills and professionalism, of course, to ensure adequate delivery of the information, of course, to check the facts and to consider objectivity as far as delivery of such information is concerned. That's a story that is also captured under this particular section. Remember, this is the business. This is the county section. This is the county section of this particular newspaper. And the 3-horse race is a battle to succeed Togolos, of course, also captured. And now, remember, initially it has been the 2-horse race, but now 3-horse race. But the question is now, who is now the 3rd race? Of course, earlier on, talking about the 3-horse race, talking about the 2-horse race, of course, we begin to think about Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition flag bearer Raila Amolo Odinga. At the same time, Kenya Kwanza coalition flag bearer DP William Ruto. But now the question is, who is the 3rd horse? Who is the 3rd horse? Of course, the other day we saw also Jimmy Wanjigi. Of course, that is the presidential flag bearer for the Safina party, saying that it's also a race horse as well. And so it's not a story of 2 horses, but now 3-horse race. Now let's look at this. Of course, so interesting. The race to succeed. Of course, the race or the horse race also has been narrowed down to the county level, not just to the presidential levels, but even to the county level as well. Now the race to succeed Governor Alex Togolos on Elgeyo Marakwet has been joined by a businessman, Moses Chang'wony, running as independent candidate. Of course, this is in Elgeyo Marakwet. Of course, Chang'wony confirmed he had been cleared by the Registrar of Political Parties to vie for that particular position. Of course, this entry will lead to a 3-horse race between him Deputy Governor Wesley Rotich, and at the same time New Vision Party leader Anthony Chelimo, who will be running on this party's ticket. Of course, some of the positions, of course, have shown very stiff competitions, as they have various political leaders, of course, who are showing their constant interest under various party tickets, and some of them even going as independent candidates, especially for various gubernatorial positions, not just gubernatorial positions, but even as the same case to the presidential positions. Of course, remember currently we have 46 candidates who have already presented to the registrar of political parties, and they read their submissions, of course, that they look forward to being on the ballot on 9th of August 2022, ahead of election. Moving forward to the next story, of course, we see alarm as a donkey numbers drop, illegal slaughter ban been coming on rise again, then again and again, of course, as far as the slaughtering of a donkey is concerned with counties of Kenya. Now the number the number of donkeys in Kenya is dwindling at an alarming rate, with illegal slaughter and poor breeding methods are blamed for the crisis. Illegal slaughter of the animal has been reported in recent weeks, rendering tens of families jobless. According to Raphael Kinoti from the Brook, East Africa, the trend is worrying as the meat is unsafe for human consumption. But the donkey's meat is unsafe, of course, according to that particular staff, of course, Raphael Kinoti from the Brook, East Africa, saying that meat, of course, donkey's meat is unsafe for human consumption. But on the contrary, we see in some other regions donkey being slaughtered, and that has seen the reduction of the number of donkeys significantly over the past 2 months, according to this particular research, of course, presented under that particular section. And finally, we see 50 needy learners. We see 50 needy learners in Kilifi now get full scholarship from Centum. Of course, that's a good news, especially during this time that parents are complaining over excessive requirements needed, especially from them, for the admission of students. Meanwhile, during a time that country is facing tough economic challenges, when the prices of commodities are on the rise. And so this would be a good news, as more than 50 children from poor families in Kilifi have received full scholarship from Centum Real Estate Company. Of course, the fund will help most of the students access education at top secondary schools in the country. Of course, every year the company, which is settling up in multi-billion city in Kilifi, gives scholarships to students who perform well in KCPE. That's good news for the residents of Kilifi County, of course, and particularly for those who have benefited from that. Of course, congratulations to the students as well. So far, 300 young bright learners have benefited since the program was launched. Of course, we've seen Kenneth Mbai, managing director at Centum, now saying since they started that particular program, 100 students have joined the university through their just because of their support, and that is a good move, especially by that to benefit the residents of Kilifi County. Remember, those are some of the stories that were given coverage under the county section, but now I'm getting to the third bit of the show, of course, whereby I told you I'll be gathering your comments, of course, from our various comment section as far as the issue of running mate is concerned. Of course, today in the third bit of the show, we'll be talking about that particular issue. Realize that the issue of the running mate is on the rise, not just in Azimio la Umoja, not just in Kenya Kwanza, not just in Safina Party, and even those that are vying as independent candidates. Of course, they need running mates as well. But now the question was today, assume you are to get chance, assume you are to get opportunity to advise or to give your message to these presidential flag bearers for various political parties. At the same time, even for those who are going as independent, what would be your message to them concerning the issue of the running mate, that which is seen to be giving them a lot of headache as per now? Remember to share with me your comments. I'm taking a short break. Coming later, I'll be reading your comments, of course, as we come to the end of this particular show, of course, the breakfast show. Remember, you can drop your comments via WhatsApp number. The number is 0796 840560. At the same time, you can use our social media platforms. Of course, our fan page, Facebook is Pure Africa TV. At the same time, you can drop your comment, especially you following from our Pure Africa TV official app. You can as well drop your comment via that particular platform. Of course, I'll be getting your comment. Meanwhile, you can as well tweet. Hashtag is the breakfast show. Twitter at Pure Africa TV, hashtag breakfast show. Short break coming later. I'll be reading your comments even as we come to the end of the breakfast show. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Continue staying with me. In a short while, I'll be back with much more. Of this particular show, of course, the breakfast show, live from Pure Africa TV, Pure Africa Radio. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Remember, now I'm back to read at look at various comment section, of course, pertaining to this subject of discussion today. Of course, the subject of discussion Remember, earlier on I asked you a question that assume you are to get to share your message to some of the presidential flag bearers, of course, those that are going under various coalition tickets, those that are going under various political parties tickets, and even those that are going as independent candidates. Remember, I asked you opportunity to share with them a message, especially about the running mate issue. What would you tell them? Of course, that's what I'm back for here, to look at the comment section, of course, to see some of the comments as far as that is pertained. Of course, I see there's a Linda Kinyutildin from Homa Bay County saying that the issue of female gender, saying female gender would be looked at. Of course, that's a comment. And moving forward to the next comment, of course, I see popularity, the issue of popularity, of course, this by Victor Odongo. And finally, I see Kimani, of course, saying that regional balance to be considered. Remember, these are some of the comments that have been made there as far as that particular issue is considered. But remember, it is you. Of course, remember, the entire fate is to be decided by the various committees that are formed in an effect to decide on the most suitable running mate. Of course, each and every political party have employed their different strategies, or their various strategies to get or to settle on the most suitable candidates. Of course, in Azimio la Umoja, the committee of 7 has been tasked with that particular responsibility. Of course, in Kenya Kwanza, DP is to decide the final fate. Of course, that particular group that was given that opportunity to propose some of the suitable candidates, of course they did, but it is the DP, of course the Kenya Kwanza flag bearer, to decide the final fate of that. Meanwhile, the independent candidates, they will get to decide on their own for that, for their running mate, or for that position of the running mate. Remember, this has been the preface, of course, since the first bit, of course, we began first bit, second bit, you are there with me, third bit, you are still here with me, even as we now come to an end of this. My name is Evans Odhiambo. Remember to join me again tomorrow exactly at 7 o'clock in the morning for much more. Remember, each and every story that will be transpiring, I'll be back to let you know in time. Continue also staying tuned to Pure Africa TV, of course, the subscription, of course, get to enjoy. Remember, Pure Africa TV is the destination of your choice for both local content and local and international content. At the same time, local entertainment, international entertainment as well. Always stay tuned. Remember to join me tomorrow exactly at 7 o'clock in the morning. Have a good day, and remember to stay safe. Bye for now.